Hi, welcome to the bathtub. When you hear this sound, the sound of tiny little mouse footsteps walking slowly across a tree branch somewhere in Antarctica. I don't know what that means. Then you know you're at this is the new post-tech. It's a post-tech decade. We're all natural, 100% goodness. We don't have we don't have any CGI. We don't have any pixels. We don't do any sort of glamour. There's no fonts. We don't do fonts and those cool scroll bys and stuff that people do when they know how to work their computers. We don't do any of that stuff. We don't even edit these things. You can tell we don't even edit them because we don't know how. And it's all natural, just all natural goodness. Just drinking water. We do it in the natural light of day. And this is also the long sleeve shirt edition of the bathtub. We wear short sleeve shirts pretty much all year round if we can in San Luis Obispo, but it's actually a little cold. It's amazing. We've got a little chill here in September. I don't know where that came from, and even a little tiny bit of rain this morning. So that was probably preparing us for the all natural bathtub. Today, a lot of people are sick of hearing me talk about George Simenon, but basically, I just talk about whatever I'm reading, and I'm always reading. I'm often reading George Simenon, so I'm afraid that's where we're at. And this is we've been calling these like Simenon-Durs and Not-So-Durs. They're called the hard novels, which are the non-Maigrets, and the Not-So-Durs are the Maigrets. And I've been kind of reading through the entire series as they were published in French, in the original French, and then they've all been retranslated in the past 10 years by a terrific project at Penguin. I mean, they've just actually basically retranslated everything. And the new translations are wonderful. And I like the old ones, but I've heard that there's some problems with them. And the ones I read I really basically read these over a few days. I mean, you read one a day. There was just a couple of hours, a couple of good soaks, and you're done with these wonderful books. They're just so enjoyable. And I really like the late ones. I much prefer the late ones. So I read Maigret's Anger, and I'm trying to remember this one. It's hard to look this up because there's a misprint. This was originally published in '63, and it's a really good one. What's interesting to me about always the Simenons is I'll talk a little about endings today because a couple of people has quite sensibly asked me about why I dislike endings. I often complain about the endings of novels, as I slightly complained about the ending of Cormac McCarthy's All the Pretty Horses. And that is something about endings that does bother me the most. But I always feel like Simenon, he never does anything spectacular. It's never anything brilliant. There's never a surprise ending in Simenon. But he always seems to just sort of nail it, just in a nice, soft, simple, sensible way. And he brings out something about the story that we didn't quite understand before. And it's a bit surprising. And Maigret's Anger is quite a good one. It's about Maigret's, of course, his most interest. He's more interested not in the people surrounding a crime than he is in the crime itself. And he's basically looking into a case of a man who was murdered, who runs a bunch of strip clubs in Paris. And in the course of learning about this man and his business, he finds out this guy was just a real super businessman, really nice guy, always did his job well, didn't treat the girls bad, married one of the girls, but still is a good husband and all this stuff. And in the course of finding out about this guy, and what happens to him, Maigret slowly gets involved, as he always does in these characters' lives. And at the end, when he does finally figure out who it is that did it, I won't give it away, but he finds out who did it, he really gets angry. He's really pissed off. And that's basically and at the end, you understand why he's angry. It makes perfectly good sense. Because the man who kills doesn't kill for love or passion or because he's angry. He does it on a very cold-blooded reason. I think it's a pretty good book. Anyway, I like all the Maigrets. I'll do the Maigrets first. I usually basically sandwich them around a Durs novel or a hard novel. Meg Ray and the Ghost, another excellent one, early '60s originally, brand new translation in the past couple of years. We should probably give these people a little credit since these the translators are all done a very good job. This one is Roz Schwartz, and there's a few that keep doing a lot of them. Roz Schwartz did this one, and this one is done by William Hobson. Seems the same names keep coming up. Anyway, Maigret and the Ghost is another one where a man, basically there's a character named Lognon who's nicknamed by Meg Ray and the other guys in the police department as Hard Done By. he's kind of an ugly old crazy old cop who always looks like he's in a bad mood and always feels cheated, and nothing ever works out for Lognon. And he's recurring, one of the few recurring characters besides Maigrets' assistants and Mrs. Maigret in the novels. And whenever he shows up, he's distinguished by one thing: everything goes badly for him, and two, he's really a good cop. And he always, when he gets onto something, he doesn't leave it alone. He always tries to do a good job. He's actually a very professional guy. Anyway, this starts off with Lognon gets shot outside of a woman's house, and everybody thinks that he's having an affair with this young girl. And only Simenon, Maigret immediately knows that it's just, this guy's an old pro. He's doing something. And in the course of the book, he, again, opens up the lives of these people in the neighborhood, particularly of this really, really old aristocratic art collector and his wife. And I just, I actually read this about 5 years ago or 6 years ago. I used it in a class, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. And I read it again with just as much pleasure. And again, when he comes to the end of the book, he always brings a little something extra, just a little something that Simenon understands. And it's not belabored. The endings come fairly quick. And I guess that's one of the things I do like about an ending of a story, is it takes you somewhere you didn't quite expect to go. This is The Door, and this is published, this is an old edition. It was originally published in France in 1962, and this translation was 1964. I used to have all these hardcovers. I started selling them because I just don't have room for all my Simenons. But this is just kind of it's a middle-of-the-road serious novel by Simenon. Very a slightly unusual one. And I like all his novels. I think I don't think I've ever been disappointed, except maybe by some of the early Maigrets I found a little boring. But The Door is a terrific little novel about a guy. It's a little unusual. It's one of the few novels of Simenon's which kind of is a love story. There's another one I like that's Three Beds in Manhattan, which is a sort of a love story. And it's basically about a real strong affection between this married couple. And the man has come back from the war. Was it World War II? I think he comes back from World War II. And he's lost both his hands. And he's got hooks on his hands. And he's got this pretty wife who's always been passionate about. And they have had a fairly passionate relationship. And after he comes home, he feels pretty hopeless. And his wife goes off to work. And she becomes involved with a neighbor in the sense that she helps a friend of hers get her brother a place to live in their building. And this brother also has, he's in a wheelchair. So he also has a crippling problem. He's crippled by something. And he's in a wheelchair. He's an artist. And every time his wife gets involved with anybody else, even talks to other men, this man in Bernard in The Door gets jealous, and he starts to fantasize. And every time she goes downstairs to the door of this man's room, this guy Bernard starts to get jealous. That's really the setup. What I love about Simenon, he sets that up in the first chapter, and the whole history of their relationship, and they're fairly distant from each other for now. Anyway, it's like all his books. It always has some sort of there is something that compulsion in his central character, who are worried about something and who are looking outside of their lives and the steadfastness of their lives, and worried that something's not going to last. And sometimes they journey out of that world. Usually they journey out of that world as a bit of a disaster. Anyway, the course of the book is really him and his wife kind of reconnecting, and him talking to her about his jealousy. And they start to kind of almost, the relationship almost kind of reblossoms in a way, because they're discussing all of these things. And I don't want to tell any more again about this. It's an unusual Simenon in the sense that it is more about this love between these two people. But at the same time, there is a darkness to it. And when Simenon comes to the end, there's only 2 or 3 things that can happen by the time he gets to that point. We reach the end of the book. And yet it's quite a moving book in a way. And it comes fairly quick. Again, his endings, they're not surprise endings. One of these things, one of a few things can happen in this life that you have compressed before you. But when you come to the end of it, I always feel like it's not ridiculous. It's not a surprise ending, and it does make sense. And there's a lot of things that make sense about the ending of this interesting book, The Door, which I think will stick in my mind. It may be one of my favorite Simenons in the future. I don't know. Anyway, 3 great books. I love all the Maigret's, especially after the first 10 or 15. They get much better near the end. And if you're looking for a short, slightly unusual book from Simenon, The Door is a good one. But I like every one of the non-Maigret's, I've got to say. All right, stay safe. I'm going to do one more of these pretty quick. Long sleeve shirts. Got to keep warm.